Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, students, good morning and welcome. I'm Veronica Taylor. I have the privilege of serving as the Dean of the College of Asia and the Pacific here at the ANU. Before we begin formally this morning, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, and we pay our respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal people, past and present. I'm really delighted to officially welcome you to the 33rd Annual Indonesia Update Conference. It's remarkable that we've had an event of this quality and depth continuing since 1988 and attracting scholars, activists, government officials and students from all over the world. Later in the day, we'll be joined by His Excellency Ambassador Mr. Najib Rifat Kusuma, and we have with us already this morning many speakers and participants who've travelled great distances to be here. Thank you very much for joining us here for the update. I want to also extend a very warm welcome to our keynote speakers, Professor Nancy Lee Peluso from UC Berkeley and Dr. Adriaan Bednar from the Van Vollenhoven Institute at Leiden University. As you know, this year's theme is Land and Development in Indonesia, Searching for the People's Sovereignty. And we're delighted that the meeting is being co-convened by two anthropologists, Dr. John McCarthy from the Crawford School of Public Policy here in the college, and Professor Cathy Robinson from our School of Culture, History and Language in the college. So the theme of the update is land and development. Rural development, food security and land reform are high on the agenda of Indonesia's new administration. Some development experts argue that resolving land tenure problems can support investment in land and increase the productivity and the efficiency of resource use. However, in Indonesia, infrastructure development continues to be blighted by unresolved problems of land registration, titling and formalisation. At the same time, key questions remain regarding how to recognise customary rights and reform the governance of forestry and mining. Why has land reform been so difficult in Indonesia? What can we learn from the history of Indonesia's land titling programs? What lessons from elsewhere can Indonesia draw on to resolve these problems? The 2015 Indonesia Update will examine land law and its administration in decentralised Indonesia, from land acquisitions in Papua to asset ownership in the villages of Sulawesi and Java, to the tenure conflicts associated with the oil, palm and mining booms in Kalimantan and Sumatra. We have papers that will consider Indonesia's many land challenges, and presenters will also examine the environmental implications of land management. It's going to be a rich and varied Indonesia update, and I really wish you a terrific couple of days engaged in deep analysis and really intense and robust debate. Before I close my remarks, I want to acknowledge with thanks the continuing support of the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which has been a long-standing partner, collaborator and supporter of the Indonesia Update project, and we appreciate that very much. I also want to acknowledge with great thanks the hard work of our two conveners and all of the Indonesia specialists here at ANU who have collaborated through the update and through our Indonesia project to create a forum in which you can have the rich kind of discussion that will follow in the sessions today and tomorrow. And with that, welcome. I officially open the update and pass to my colleague Dr. Marcus Mietzner to convene the first session. Thank you.
It's a great tradition of the Indonesia Update conferences that it begins with the political update of the year, and this year will be no exception. Last year, my colleague and I at Espinal explained to you how Jokowi won the presidential elections of 2014. Turns out that was the easy part. And for today, I'm quite relieved, in fact, that the task of explaining to you how he did in his first year is not falling to me, but in fact to my two colleagues to my left. We have two fantastic speakers today, both of whom are members of the upcoming generation of political scientists on Indonesia. Both are PhD candidates at the Department of Political and Social Change at the Bell School here at the ANU. We will first hear the main talk about political update events from 2015 from Burhanuddin Muhtadi. Most of you, the Indonesians of course, will know him as a very prominent media commentator. He is also a member and a leading member, in fact, of two polling institutes. One of them is LSE, and the other one is Indikator. He is currently writing his PhD thesis here on vote buying in Indonesian elections. After that, we will hear from the discussant, Eve Warburton, who is, as I said, also a PhD candidate at the Department of Political and Social Change. She is researching the issue of resource nationalism in Indonesia. She has published widely. She has edited, in fact, special editions of Inside Indonesia, and she has also contributed widely to New Mandala and other widely read blogs. So without further ado, we will first hear from Burhanuddin Muhtadi for 40 minutes, and then from Eve Warburton for 10. Please welcome Burhanuddin Muhtadi.
Thank you, Marcus, for your introduction. Thank you, everyone, for your coming. Thanks, Pak Budi from the ANU Indonesia project for giving this opportunity to speak. I spoke to Pak Budi last night that it would be more interesting, more exciting to talk about Australian politics now rather than Indonesia. I have been here since 2013, and I have witnessed in Australian had maybe four, right? 4 prime ministers in just over 2 years. Okay, back to my job. I would like to present my paper on Jokowi first year, a weak president caught between oligarchic politics and reform. This gloomy picture could represent the topic that I will be presenting. So I will start my presentation by discussing the puzzle. Jokowi's election raised hope that there will be change, but it took only a few months for Jokowi to produce unwittingly public disillusionment, some regression in democracy. And then I will look at Jokowi's first year in the context of cartelization and oligarchy theories. Then I will address some challenges that Jokowi is facing, Jokowi's triple minority position, Jokowi facing pressure from party oligarch. Afterward, I will discuss Jokowi as a political leader, and then discuss how is a personal preference in terms of economy vis-a-vis democratic reform, and then I will frame this in the context of early expectation that people had about Jokowi, whether the hope in Jokowi was misplaced or there was an element of misreading Jokowi. And lastly, I will review the adjustment that Jokowi has made to look at whether we will be optimistic or pessimistic. Okay, I will remind you all, last year, expectations were high for reform. Unlike previous president, Jokowi coming outside the Jakarta power structure, he has no ties with influential families, he has no military background. Jokowi was seen as the product of reformasi, since he has been able to rise to political prominence through era of decentralization and direct local election. And in terms of campaign strategy, Jokowi introduced a new way of participatory politics while climbing up to the top of pyramid. by attracting a vast network of volunteers unassociated with any political party, including support from anti-corruption and human rights activists. He was hailed as a breath of fresh air in Indonesian politics. His victory over Prabowo Subianto, a Suharto-era general with a brutal past, was deemed as decisive victory for democracy. When he was officially inaugurated as president on 20 of October 2014, he promised to bring new style of politics to Indonesia, thereby generating optimism among Indonesians that his government would turn to reform. What happened then? It turned out that Jokowi has placed a greater value on realpolitik over reform, as evident is in his selection of cabinet members, his response to the controversy of Budi Gunawan, allegedly corrupt senior police officer, and then his handling of attempt of the weakening of KPK, anti-corruption agency in Indonesia. He has fallen into the lowland of old politics, turning him into a business-as-usual politician who engaged in promiscuous power sharing and backroom maneuvers. So that's why now this picture has been circulated massively since January 2015. This is cynical remark actually, a part of SPY picture, Pie Kabare, who you met, it was better in my time, wasn't it? It's like, you know, a mockery. So I will raise the puzzle. The puzzle that I would like to discuss is about why did Jokowi fail to deliver, and what has gone wrong with Jokowi, in whom so much hope was invested. Let me discuss briefly about the framework. So there are two main ways of explaining Indonesian politics, the problem of Indonesian politics after Suharto era. First is about oligarchy thesis, and the second is about cartelisation. One stress material power, another stress political institution. The driving argument behind oligarchy thesis, despite that Indonesia has enjoyed democratic consolidation since 1998, the post-Suharto government is still controlled by old oligarchic and predatory forces. So according to this school, there will be no reform because of the interest of the wealthy. And the second, cartel approach, claim that Indonesian contemporary politics has been dominated by a wide spectrum of political parties that collude collectively, and then they enjoy the spoil of power after election. So the core feature is ideological stance is not important for making coalition, and then election results don't have any effect in making coalition after the election, and no significant opposition in parliament. According to cartel approach, there will be no reform because the power of promiscuous power sharing in making coalition. So I will argue that despite the power of oligarchy in explaining Jokowi first year in office, some of the events during year one in his presidency were hardly consistent with oligarchy paradigm. At the beginning, there were at least 5 optimism for Jokowi that would take a progressive reform which contradict with expectation of cartelization theory. First, rather than building an expansive cartel to campaign for him during last year's election, Jokowi just formed a limited coalition. Second, Jokowi promised no reward for the support he received from political parties and elite, and emphasized that he was building a coalition with no strings attached, so with no condition, koalisi tanpa syarat. Third, prior to his inauguration as president, Jokowi put himself in a bind by promising to reduce the number of ministry in his upcoming cabinet. He also promised that his cabinet would be dominated by non-partisan professionals. And then the 2014 presidential election produced a sharp line between the ruling and opposition parties. And last, prior to announcing his cabinet, Jokowi alluded that his cabinet would be working cabinet kerja, symbolizing an anti-cartelist appeal. And this name, of course, was stark contrast to Dus Abdurrahman Wahid National Unity Cabinet, Megawati's Mutual Assistance Cabinet, Yudhoyono's United Indonesia Cabinet, whose cabinet names emphasize broad-based coalition and nuance of cartelization. However, the political reality was much trickier. Governing is always more difficult than campaigning. Jokowi was already in triple minority position. First, Jokowi was supported by a government coalition which doesn't enjoy a parliamentary majority. So this might end party cartel, but the cost for Jokowi, he lose majority coalition in parliament. Second, he remains a marginal figure in his own political party with less authority than previous president. Third, he is a new kid on the block, a complete newcomer to national stage. So this limitation ultimately pushed Jokowi to reward the ruling parties and oligarchs who supported him to govern effectively. As a result, Jokowi has embraced the old style of politics, the old style of horse trading for prominent posts in the cabinet and other high-ranking positions. So if you look at the cabinet formation, it's clear. The cabinet lineup reflected strong influence of Jokowi, of Megawati, Surya Paloh, and Yusuf Kala. Surya Paloh is a head of Nasdem Party. He is, of course, 100% oligarch. You can see from this picture. Yeah. So this is just a mockery to show how big Surya Paloh influence on Jokowi cabinet. Okay. So the Jokowi cabinet could be read as the victory of oligarchy theories over cartelization. It didn't meet the strict definition of party cartel because a number of significant political parties were not accommodated in the cabinet. It clearly served the interests of party oligarch within his ruling coalition. So in the cabinet lineup, there were 15 party appointees in cabinet, just only 34 to keep his minority coalition. This is not to mention those ministers who were professional or ex-military, have no official affiliation with political party, but were in cabinet because they were cronies of party oligarch. For example, Riyamizat Riyakudu, the defense minister, he is a Megawati's confidant. So this chart actually tells something that Jokowi cabinet produced more proof, the oligarchy thesis, than party cartel. So if you look at the pie chart, Jokowi government just were supported only 37% of the seat in parliament. So after years of being controlled by the so-called party cartel, for the first time, Indonesia established a limited coalition. The slim coalition could basically create a window of opportunity for forming a professional cabinet. Unfortunately, Jokowi was eventually trapped in transactional cabinet, falling in the common practice of trading cabinet as appeasement to his party oligarch. He also suffered double loss. He lost a big opportunity to establish a minimum winning coalition, a winning coalition without unnecessary members that could potentially be formed by at least incorporating one or two new coalitional partners. And second, Jokowi paid a high price for political support provided by the ruling coalition, which didn't have parliamentary majority. So it was striking if we compare between Jokowi's cabinet and Yudhoyono's cabinet, those ministers who coming from political parties, it was almost no different between them. Jokowi has 15 political appointees in his cabinet, while SBY has around 17 political appointees. Though paying the same price, Jokowi obtained the support less than 40%, while Yudhoyono received that of an oversized coalition, 75%. And after the cabinet announcement, Jokowi seemed to be more dependent to Yusuf Kala, to Megawati, Paloh, aside from recruiting their cadre and confident in the cabinet. Jokowi also granted greater access to patronage opportunities. This is another proof of oligarchic style concession. In the case of, for example, this one. In the case of Surya Paloh, he was behind the dubious energy deal between the government with Angola. Another clear example of how Jokowi was under the thumb of his own alliance when he appointed Megawati's confidant, Megawati's former adjutant, Budi Gunawan as police chief in January 2015. While in 2010, Budi Gunawan faced allegation of dubious transaction in his bank account. Ironically, Jokowi refused for weeks to withdraw Budi's nomination, even after the KPK, anti-corruption agency in Indonesia, announced Budi was under investigation for accepting bribe. The Jakarta-based English newspaper, Jakarta Post, made a headline, Jokowi a hostage of his own alliance, suggesting that for the president, the enemy to fear is the enemy within. Facing the prospect of losing his popularity and his image as anti-corruption figure, Jokowi finally canceled Budi inauguration. He reached out Prabowo for his support to cancel Budi Gunawan candidacy and submitted another alternative for approval from the opposition-dominated parliament. So from this case, it is clear that despite oligarchy interpretation is more successful in explaining Jokowi's government after the election, but Jokowi is not completely tamed by the oligarch. Burhanuddin Haiti was ultimately appointed as a police chief, while Budi Gunawan was chosen as a second-in-commander police officer. However, it was not to be the end of political drama. It was only its beginning instead. The unexpected nomination had escalated tension between KPK and police. The police then entered the fray, naming chairman of KPK, Abraham Samad, as a suspect in document forgery case. So it's silly case actually. And then Bambang Wijoyanto, another commissioner, was arrested for allegedly instructing witness to provide false testimony in trial held several years ago. And Jokowi is reluctant to defend the KPK when the police retaliated by charging KPK commissioner was deeply disappointing for the volunteer support that brought him to power. So it is true that SBY was widely known for his indecisiveness, but at least he defended KPK much better than Jokowi. Now, so what happened with Jokowi? So I would like to look at him in personal factors. In addition to pressure from oligarch forces, Jokowi personally lacked leadership on anti-corruption and human rights issues. So his agenda has largely been driven by his focus on economic development. He sees himself primarily as practical man, pragmatic man, who domestically focus, more concerned with concrete policies at the expense of abstract concepts. His grand ambition are related to economic development and social welfare, which, according to him, constitute an important legitimation for political power. Other sectors, according to him, this is just my reading about him, seen as secondary to or an instrument to improve the economy. So Jokowi's concern on democratic reform should be read in the lens of economic perspective. Democratic reform should be put as a mechanism to increase good governance, bureaucratic reform, transparency, efficiency, reducing anti-corruption, reducing corruption and red tape, something that facilitates for the economy. When economy is at odds with anti-corruption agenda, Jokowi seems to deprioritize the latter for the sake of economic interest. I can provide you two evidence. First, amid the decrease in the proportion of budget being spent in recent years and an effort to increase government spending following economic slowdown, Jokowi instructed to draft a circular letter containing a guidance for regional leaders on how to avoid activity that could lead to becoming corruption suspect. So he seems to hold the belief that the corruption crackdown in Indonesia is discouraging some officials at national and local level from starting new projects and instilling fear that they will be blamed for or even charged with criminal corruption case. And another example, the dismissal of Budi as the chief of police detective division in just recently. So according to Jokowi, corruption eradication should not be carried out, corruption eradication should be carried out without controversy. So he had to leave his position as the chief Kabar Eskrim, allegedly due to police raid and investigation into a major corruption case involving state-owned port operator PT Pelindo. Jokowi seemingly has no problem with anti-corruption as long as it is having no impact for economy. So another thing about Budi Waseso dismissal, actually there is an element of intra-oligarchic conflict within the ruling oligarchy. So if we read the work written by Winters, Hadis, or Robinson, there is a tendency that oligarchy is politically homogeneous. In fact, oligarchs are not politically and economically homogeneous. Budi Waseso is Budi Gunawan protege, close with Megawati, and he did investigation on corruption case implicating Pelindo director, Lino, who is widely known as Yusuf Kalaman. So it's like intra-oligarchic conflict. So because of his focus on economy, unsurprisingly, if we look at Jokowi's policy achievement using Markus Mietzner terminology of technocratic populism, Jokowi has developed narrative based on the mixture between non-ideological pragmatism and social empathy with the poor. That's why high on the list of Jokowi top priorities are investment deregulation. The Jokowi government simplified the existing regulation that burden investor. He is widely known for removal fuel subsidy to free fund for development spending. He also good job for pushing infrastructure, railways, toll roads, seaport, and facilitating the disbursement of village fund, again for infrastructure, irrigation, bridge, road, and of course social welfare program, health care, and then smart card. Another characteristic of Jokowi's presidency, sometimes Jokowi's rhetoric is conflicting each other. For example, at the time of World Economic Forum in April 2015, he said that please come and invest in Indonesia. If you have a problem, call me. I stand here today to invite you to join me and my people on incredible journey to make an incredible point. Afterward, at a gathering of Asian and African leaders, he took a more strident tone, calling for a new global economic order that was not dominated by Western-led institutions, saying that the idea that the world economic problem can be solved only through the World Bank, IMF, and ADB is obsolete and must be abandoned. I am the opinion that the fate of the global economy should not only be left to those three financial institutions. Another thing, Jokowi's presidency also seemed amateurish. In March 2015, Jokowi, I don't read what I signed, became a worldwide trending topic on Twitter after the president admitted that he had signed off on controversial regulation without reading it. And another photo, this photo was taken during the welcoming ceremony for Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan during his visit to Indonesia this year. Just look at his leg, Jokowi's leg. This photo was circulated on Twitter, symbolizing groovy. Yeah? So, yeah, his leg's very clumsy. And then, having said all of this, has Jokowi another price to pay for rewarding his party oligarch? Clear, based on this data, based on face-to-face interview, we can see Jokowi's eroding support from the public. Recent survey conducted by SMRC discovered that Jokowi's approval rating was at its lowest ebb since he took office 2014. So a nosedive from 62% before the Budi Gunawan affairs took place in January. So some supporters of Jokowi Dodo are also starting to become disillusioned with their champion. You can also compare between Jokowi's approval rating and Yudhoyono in their first year in office. The survey also found that Jokowi's approval rating was far more behind that of former President Yudhoyono in first year of his 2 terms presidency, which stood at 70% and 66% in his first term approval rating in 2005 and his second term in 2010, respectively. It's clear the level of dissatisfaction toward Jokowi was higher than the level of satisfaction rating. Commonly, in Indonesian case, presidents still enjoy honeymoon period with the public in their first year in office. So this is not the case in Jokowi. His honeymoon period is truly over, and his own alliance, sadly speaking, contributed for the ending of his honeymoon period. It's just to look at how the public perceive economic condition. Just look at the red line indicating much worse. There was a big jump in the red line. So this survey in July 2015 was conducted just after presidential election. So everything was good at the time. But now, 1 year after that, at the time in July 2014, just only 16% of respondents saying the economy at the time was worse. Now 31.5% saying the economy had even worse since Jokowi took his presidency. And then this one is about Indonesian political condition according to the public. 37.5% of respondents believe that the current political situation had deteriorated under Jokowi's watch. Again, look for red line indicating bad condition. There was a big jump in the red line. In July 2014, respondents who believed the political situation was bad, only 19, but now there was significant increase in the public bad perception of political condition. I love this graph. It reminds me Tony Abbott. Poor Tony Abbott. If he were Indonesian president, he would not be removed by politicians. So despite a majority of voters saying that they were dissatisfied, disapproved with Jokowi's performance, approximately 98% of voters surveyed believe that Jokowi should not be removed from office before 2019 election. So only 13.2% of voters surveyed believe Jokowi should be removed before 2019. So the result indicate that Indonesians want the performance of Jokowi to be improved while simultaneously maintaining constitutional political process. So this is about adjusting the ruling formula. I have provided strong evidence why optimism turned into skepticism toward Jokowi. If I had given this presentation 2 or 3 months ago, I would have gone to excessive pessimism. But recent development about the adjustment Jokowi has made to ruling formula are quite promising. So he has begun to balance ruling and opposition parties in a way that benefited him. However, of course, it takes two to tango. Prabowo seemed to readjust his strategy as well to leaning toward unconfrontational approach when dealing with the Jokowi government. There are several reasons behind the move of Prabowo. First, Prabowo may realize that the public is not generally in favor of radical opposition. And second, Prabowo played nice and softened his opposition because in reality, he could only control his own party, Gerindra, and PKS. PAN was completely out of Prabowo's radar since the new chairman, Zulkifli Hasan, took office in May 2015. The strength and solidity of opposition parties has basically weakened since Golkar and PPP experienced internal rift. Note that Yudhoyono's Democratic Party is not officially opposition, which allowed Democratic Party to maneuver in any direction. And third reason, Prabowo may be caught in his own promise to be a Democrat. If Prabowo wanted to maintain his chance 2019 election, he should be more patient. And lastly, there was speculation that a short deal had been reached. So this suspicion seems to be confirmed by a closed-door meeting between Jokowi, Prabowo, and Abu Rizal Bakri ahead of DPR plenary session to pass 2015 state budget. So the concession was allegedly linked to Prabowo's Kiani Kertas, who one of Prabowo's company that has been experiencing financial difficulties. But the evidence is much clearer in the case of providing concession to Abu Rizal Bakri, who was able to secure loan from the government in order to pay compensation to victims of mud spill triggered by one of Abu Rizal Bakri companies in 2006. Just to give you an overview about complex power struggle, this is how mass media portray complex power struggle. Yeah. So it's time to remember that no one should expect Jokowi will govern with ease given complicated political context that he and his team operating in. So he reached out Prabowo to look for support. And then another recent development of his consolidation of power base is about more Javanese approach to Megawati. So previously, there was a love and hate relationship between Jokowi and Mega, making PDIP as the biggest shareholder of Jokowi's government has been engulfed in complicated relationship with state police. Apart from the Budi Gunawan case, Jokowi refused to dismiss Luhut Panjaitan and Rini Sumarno, both ministers, despite Megawati's mounting pressure on Jokowi to remove them from office. However, Megawati cannot deny the fact that it is only Jokowi who is able to end PDIP's long way to become the ruling party. Yeah, love and hate relationship. But the relationship between Mega and Jokowi cannot fully explain in the lens of oligarchy perspective. So unlike Yusuf Kala, Prabowo, Abu Rizal Bakri, or even Surya Paloh, Jokowi had given non-oligarchic style concession to Megawati. And Megawati is not completely oligarch. Winters call her as a hidden oligarch. So Jokowi used cultural approach to tame Jokowi. Nguwongke. Jokowi is kissing the hand of Mega, showing his respect to her, inviting her to come at the state ceremony event, like this photo, for example. Jokowi invited Mega and Puan to take historical walk along with Asian African leaders and head of state, and accommodating some of Megawati's confidence in his governmental post. And the last recent consolidation of Jokowi's power base that helped strengthening his standing. So with the passage of time, Jokowi is getting more experience in dealing with elites. He has taken a classic stick and carrot strategy. Jokowi seemed to undertake harsh measures following leadership dispute within Golkar and PPP, as indicated in his government alleged role for issuing ministerial decree to acknowledge pro-Jokowi faction in either parties. Another example of stick approach is his appointment of Nasdem politician Prasetyo as the Attorney General. Since then, the Attorney General office arrested several politicians from opposition, including the head of Golkar West Java chapter, Irianto Saifuddin, for his alleged graft when he was a head of district in Indramayu. It is clear that Jokowi is willing to use state instrument to send a clear message to the opposition, not to destabilize his administration. But he also offered carrots for providing a number of concessions for the KMP. Aside from government loan for victims of mud spill provided for Abu Rizal Bakri, the Home Minister Cahyokumolo, for example, had officially submitted a request for significant annual funding for political parties, which in turn gained a lot of support from opposition. And another maneuver made by Jokowi was his success to strengthen power base by recruiting PAN, National Mandat Party, to support his government. So with the presence of the fifth biggest political party in parliament, PAN, the ruling coalition now has inched closer to get a majority in parliament. So from 37% to 46%. If you look at the photo, the graph, now for Jokowi, it is easy by benefiting from pro-Jokowi faction in Golkar and PPP, at least collecting 5 to 6% from Golkar and PPP, he will be able to outnumber opposition in parliament. Before that, just giving summary. After recent consolidation, Jokowi power base and weakening the opposition of political parties, he began to devise strategies to regain broad popular appeal. Budi Waseso dismissal, for example, despite PDIP refusal, gained a lot of support from anti-corruption activists. And then the appointment of well-respected anti-graft campaigner Teten Masduki as presidential chief of staff, and then rejecting Yusuf Kala's demand to dissolve the office. So it's clear that now Jokowi is moving to retake public trust in him. And my conclusion, first, Jokowi failed to deliver on his bold promise of reform during his first year in office, largely because of personal and external factors. Jokowi personally lacks leadership on anti-corruption and human rights issues. Structural factors are also important. Jokowi successfully ended the massive party cartel, but this made him vulnerable. And it is virtually impossible for any president to overturn oligarchic influence in Indonesian politics. And after consolidation of his power base, Jokowi has begun to devise strategies to regain public trust. I would like to stop my presentation by showing this amazing picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Burhan, and thank you especially for building the Tony Abbott story into your presentation. That makes Jokowi look so much better, of course, in comparison. We now hear from Yves Warburton, 10 minutes of comments on Burhan's paper. Please welcome Yves Warburton.
Good morning, and thank you, Burhan, for such an insightful and thorough analysis. So thorough, in fact, that it's made the job of a discussant rather difficult. But I think Burhan made a very compelling argument that Jokowi's failings over the past 12 months are largely because he is hostage to his own alliances and to an oligarchic political system. But I'd like to reflect a little more upon Burhan's point about who Jokowi is as a politician and as a leader. Because what has struck me, reflecting on the past year in Indonesian politics, is that many of Jokowi's leadership and policy failings are a consequence of his inept management of politics. The president is not constantly under the thumb of oligarchic, powerful elites. Rather, he often appears to be doing an unsophisticated and even amateurish job of balancing and resisting the competing interests of people around him, people like Megawati, Vice President Yusuf Kala, and of course Luhut Panjaitan, the former Chief of Staff and now Coordinating Minister for Politics, Law and Human Rights. For example, when Jokowi appointed new Director Generals for the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, an extremely strategic set of positions, he avoided appointing figures associated with either Kala or Luhut. Kala and Luhut regularly compete for influence on matters of energy and mining and rarely see eye to eye. The result was a last-minute, bungled process in which decisions were made and then changed, and in the end, it was often the least qualified nominee that was appointed. And the outcome left neither Kala, Luhut, the minister, Sudirman Said, nor the industry satisfied. This inept management of politics has led to even worse decisions that undermine the policies of a president ostensibly driven by pragmatism and technocratic approach to reform. I'm thinking here specifically of the appointment of Rizal Ramli to Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs. Rizal is a high-profile economist, but with a reputation for generating controversy. Jokowi reportedly appointed Rizal because he likes him, PDIP like him, and most importantly, Kala hates him. Rizal and Kala have disliked each other for years and regularly come into conflict over a range of policy issues. Jokowi's goal here was clearly to try and curb the influence of his own vice president, a goal which, of course, he shares with Luhut. During his first few weeks in office, Rizal has indeed ruffled feathers. He denounced key government policies, criticised state-owned companies, and challenged use of colour to a public debate on the economics of the government's electricity infrastructure targets. As a result, we have even more inconsistent policy messages coming from Cabinet, and communication between ministers is obviously more chaotic. This is a disappointing outcome for a Cabinet reshuffle that was supposed to bring greater credibility to the President's economic team. So yes, at times Jokowi is hostage to powerful elites, and at times he does a poor job of managing them. And at other times he appears to be completely overwhelmed. If we look at some of Jokowi's decisions over the past 12 months, sometimes we see no powerful puppet master pulling his strings, no single patron, nor even a clearly identifiable circle of trusted counsellors. In fact, he is hot and cold with the people who many expected would be his closest confidants and advisors. Powerful figures around Jokowi have, at key moments, found themselves entirely in the dark about strategic decisions until moments before they were announced to the public. Take, for example, the appointment of former General Sutioso to the head of BIN, the intelligence service. This is a man associated with serious human rights abuses. And the choice of Gatot Nurmantio, a conservative ultranationalist, as the new commander of the armed forces. These appointments appear not to be the titipan, or the requests from any particular oligarch or from Megawati. But neither did Jokowi arrive at these decisions after careful deliberation or wide consultation, and indeed he was reportedly shocked and disconcerted by the ensuing public backlash. I also agree with Burhan's analysis that we should not place all of the blame on the oligarchs for how the Budi Gunawan scandal evolved. Yes, Jokowi nominated a corrupt policeman for the position of National Police Chief on Megawati's request. But Jokowi abandoned the KPK and stood by mute while the police criminalised its staff and while politicians attacked its integrity. And he did this not because his hands were completely tied by oligarchs. I think in part he was overwhelmed. He did not understand the enormity of the crisis or the extent of public disapproval. But he also didn't really like Abraham Samad and the KPK's prosecutorial style. Jokowi was reportedly incensed by Samad's pursuit of Budi Gunawan without first consulting with him. Personal disdain for Samad may in part explain why Jokowi did not act to defend the KPK when it was under siege. Now, of course, there are more positive examples of where Jokowi has resisted the demands of powerful elites and acted of his own volition. I would highlight the decision to overhaul Petral, the notoriously corrupt trading arm of Pertamina that no president before him has taken on. Or the recent choice of former Indonesian Corruption Watch chief and campaign advisor Teten Masduki to replace Luhut as the president's chief of staff, or indeed the appointment of young businessman and informal economic advisor to Jokowi, Thomas Lembong, to the position of trade minister. Overall, though, there is little consistency and no clear deliberative process behind much of what Jokowi does. During my visit to Jakarta in July, it was clear that the lines of communication between Jokowi, his staff, his advisors, his ministers were seriously blocked, and that Jokowi was becoming quite isolated. His thinking and decision-making process remained something of a black box, and there's a striking sense that after 12 months in power, the so-called people's president is very much alone in the job. Finally, I'd like to comment briefly about the nature of political opposition over the past 12 months. Burhan did an excellent job, I think, of dissecting the politics of coalition building under Jokowi. But I'd like to reflect on a different aspect of opposition politics. Last year's presidential campaign was marked by the kind of ideological polarisation long said to be a thing of the past in Indonesia. On one side, we had Prabowo's coalition, which espoused ultra-nationalist, conservative and Islamist ideas, and on the other, Jokowi's coalition presented a more progressive nationalist political agenda. This polarisation and the formation of a post-election opposition bloc lasted far longer than most analysts predicted. And as Burhan outlined, the coalition is now slowly fragmenting. But Gerindra and PKS remain formally in opposition. These two parties, along with Abu Rizal Bakri's faction within Golkar, led the charge to terminate direct local elections and demanded revisions to the anti-corruption laws which underpin the KPK. So at the heart of the opposition's policy agenda was the rollback of landmark democratic reforms, And it briefly became a reality when in September last year, the outgoing parliament passed a law to remove direct elections for regional heads. And it was only under immense public pressure that SBY moved to revoke the law, out of fear his legacy would be tarnished. Anti-democratic rhetoric has also made a comeback over the past 12 months. For example, Gerindra hold cadre meetings where the theme is how to cultivate and spread the party's vision of Pancasila democracy, a concept reminiscent of New Order ideology where the theme is espouses politics based on consultation and deliberation, as distinct from contestation and direct elections. A worrying new trend to keep an eye on, I think, is the emergence of more openly anti-Chinese sentiment. Since Ahok rose to governor of Jakarta, we've seen more vocal anti-Chinese protest from conservative Islamic groups. Tempo recently published a rather sensationalist piece warning against the flood of Chinese labour entering the Indonesian market. Last month, we saw the registration of a new political party, Partai Pribumi, whose stated goal is to limit the political and economic rights of non-Indigenous Indonesians. Interestingly, Joko Santoso, former general and Gerindra party official, is the founder of Partai Pribumi. This group have embraced a more unabashed xenophobic rhetoric than was used by Prabowo in 2014. For the most part of the last year, Prabowo himself has generally kept a low profile, but he does appear in the media from time to time, commenting on particular issues where he can play up his nationalist credentials, the plight of Indonesian migrant workers abroad, or food and energy sovereignty. So I think it's entirely possible that Prabowo will make another bid for the presidency in 2019 if his health allows. So if Jokowi fails to convince the public that his plan for social and economic reform can improve their lives, and if the economy continues to decline, then by the next election we could again have fertile ground for the kind of populist reactionary challenge that Prabowo launched in 2014. Jokowi, of course, has 4 years to do better, and he might. And Burhan's analysis indicated at the end there a more positive turn in Jokowi's ruling formula. But these last 12 months have looked amateurish, and Jokowi needs to grow out of his political training wheels rather quickly if he's going to implement his promises, improve in the polls, and improve his chances of re-election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eve, and thank you very much, Burhan. I think both speakers have put a very interesting alternative interpretation of the Jokowi presidency in front of you. Basically, is Jokowi squeezed by the oligarchs, or is he a clumsy amateur hopelessly out of his depth? And I'm sure this will also now determine and dominate our discussion that is following now. Let me say a few words about the discussion. We have 20 minutes for questions and answers. Number one, there will be live streaming of this entire event, in fact, but of course, especially now for the discussion. That means for you, please only speak if you have the microphone in your hands and you're certain that it actually works, so that people all around the world can understand what you're saying. Number two, if you speak, please introduce yourself. Obviously, it's a very large crowd, and we would like to know who you are. Number three, I will take groups of 3, so we will have 3 questions and then move to answers by the speakers. And number 4, very importantly, please no speeches from the audience, just 1 question each. So no, I have 2 questions, 3 questions, and by the way, please just a very short, crisp question directed to our speakers. And with that, I'll take the first round of people who want to ask a question. Please, gentlemen over there. And yes, gentleman over there. A third one, maybe in the middle. Yes, in the back, this gentleman there.
Thank you. My name is Nathan Franklin from the Charles Darwin University. Given that Jokowi resisted for so long to actually be a candidate for the presidency, announcing only just before the legislative elections last year in April, does that have an impact on why he's perhaps amateurish as a president? Thank you.
My name is Ahmad Suharsono from Uri. My question is on the worsening health of Kala. How will it impact the inter-oligarchic conflict between Yusuf Kala, Megawati, and Surya Paloh? And how will it impact the internal rift inside Golkar between the Kala faction, Abu Rizal Bakri, and also Agung Laksono, and how it will impact Golkar's entry to the Jokowi coalition? I mean, we have waited for so long. When will Golkar come into the coalition? It seems like we will have to wait for more months. So will this recent development of Kala's health impact that kind of dynamics? Thank you.
Oh, hi there. My name's Anthony Kent from Monash University. When I was at the presidential campaign last year, and it really struck me that the driving force for Jokowi was this populist appeal and appealing directly to the public in form of demonstrations, etc. So this was a key part of his political armoury to get elected, and what's puzzling me is why hasn't he retained this strategy as part of his political armoury to overcome his present problems and also to pursue his agenda, because that, it seems to me, was really where his political capital lied.
Okay, before we move to the answers, let me just quickly repeat Ahmad's question, because there was some problem with the microphone there. So his question focuses on the intra-oligarchic rivalries involving especially Yusuf Kala. The question also how the recent health problems of the vice president might impact the crisis of Golkar's leadership, and how this all impacts on Jokowi's presidency. I think the other two questions were pretty clear. Burhan, would you like to take a first shot?
Thank you, Ahmad. About intra-oligarchic conflict, I think it's clear that these conflicts also apparent within the ruling coalition. And about the dismissal of Budi Waseso, it seems to me that the conflicts within Megawati and Yusuf Kala. But I think they have always a way to resolve the problem. So because Indonesian political structure is widely colored by cartel political party system, I think they will have a way to resolve the problem, as we will, for example, when Yusuf Kala have a problem, Megawati then visit him. Yeah? And this, about the structure of government political parties after internal rift experiencing Golkar and PPP. For me, it is a new opportunity for party cartel to come back to Indonesian politics. So if, for example, Golkar party and PPP finally announce their position, their decision to switch side to Jokowi government, Indonesia is drifting back to party cartel. So now, for example, Jokowi just received around 46% of the seat in parliament. So if finally a trial decided that either Abu Rizal or Agung Laksono faction, I think both of them tend to switch side to Jokowi. So for example, Abu Rizal Bakri is very close with Luhut Panjaitan. Jokowi maintained his relationship with Abu Rizal Bakri as well, in a way that Jokowi actually more familiar with Abu Rizal rather than Agung Laksono. First, Agung Laksono is more driven by Yusuf Kala rather than Luhut and Jokowi. So if Agung Laksono or pro-Jokowi faction under Agung Laksono leadership won the dispute, I think the political incentive will be gained more by Yusuf Kala rather than Abu Rizal Bakri. About the health problem, I don't know. And yeah, it's difficult. It depends on Okay. Of course, if there is something happen for Yusuf Kala, there will be plenarization in MPR. So People Consultative Assembly will proceed the process of substitution if anything happened with him. Yeah, but I don't know. Last question about Jokowi's approach on populism. I think Jokowi is not really populist, in my opinion. So in 2014 presidential election, he tried to attract a support from middle lower class by using, a promise on social welfare program like Kartu Sehat or Kartu Pintar. But actually it's just only, a strategy. So his characteristic are mainly driven by what Marcus Mietzner coined about technocratic populism. So he would like to combine between, social empathy with the poor, but in the end, his characters is basically technocratic. Technocratic in the sense of he is non-ideological, he is pragmatist, practical, and to some extent this tendency will be at odds with his populist appeal. For example, just 1 month after he was in office, he just removed fuel subsidy. So I don't think that he is really populist. To some extent, Prabowo more populist than Jokowi, to some extent. And he used a lot of populist appeal in 2014 election. But this populist appeal didn't manifest in his electoral support. So based on the Quickon and exit poll that we have conducted, most support for Prabowo coming from urban voters, not from rural middle lower voters. So there is a gap between vote and voice in terms of both Prabowo and Jokowi.
Okay, we had one other question. The question was whether Jokowi's allegedly late entry into the game and his reluctance to become a candidate might have anything to do with his performance now. Maybe you could have a crack on that.
First of all, I think Jokowi probably had in his mind that he would eventually one day run for the presidency, but it was organised in a very last-minute manner. The campaign was terribly disorganised, poorly funded. There was no clear policy narrative. It was all very confused. And do I think that has contributed to the sort of the amateurish way in which he has run government over the past 12 months? Yes, of course. I mean, I think that the fact that he had no experience managing political interests at the national level, I think that logically, explains partly his behaviour over the past 12 months. But I guess the question that I think is really interesting here is, we're really just beginning to get to know Jokowi as a president and as a person. And it's clear that many people don't really know who he is and how he works, and that people who have been close to him throughout his career in Solo and as governor of Jakarta, that they have been isolated over the past 12 months on and off, and also don't necessarily understand the process of his decision-making. So, to what extent can we put it down to inexperience, and to what extent can we put it down to perhaps his personality? And we don't know that yet, and I think that will be more interesting, and that will become clearer over the next period. And just to add to what Burhan said about the question of populism.
Very briefly.
Oh yes.
We need to.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, we can move on. That's fine.
No,
oh, okay. Okay. I think that it was really frustrating in the aftermath once Jokowi won, his Relawan, his volunteers, the people who were out on the streets rallying for him and garnering votes for him. These people who were not paid, they were not part of a party machine. I mean, these were the people who really felt that they put Jokowi over the line in this presidential campaign. And then I think your point is that this direct connection that he apparently had with the people was sort of lost immediately after he won. And I think that has been a really frustrating and disappointing move by Jokowi. And it is a mystery in a sense as well. Why didn't he leverage this power that he had that no other president has had before him? And I think, partly it's explained by Burhan's analysis that he had to deal with all this oligarchic politics once he was in power. But I also think he believes that, but I think
I'm very sorry, we need to at least...
Yeah, sorry, no speeches.
No speeches, and neither from the audience nor from the speakers themselves. So, final round of questions. Aristides Katopo there, and then we have gentleman there. Anyone from the middle? No? Then I go again to the left or right, like in a Labour Party room, anywhere? Yes, there, please. So, but Aristides Katopo first. Please.
Yes, thank you. My question is, do you think the use of women's power by Jokowi is amateurish, or was it in fact very effective and innovative?
Sorry?
Women's power, for instance, using the committee which salvaged the KPK appointment process.
Yeah.
Hello there. My name is Zane Goebel from La Trobe University. I was wondering if you could expand on Jokowi's cultural approach with Megawati in terms of language use.
Okay, and final question.
Yeah. My question is, if you are like stand against oligarchy, it will be a time lag that the oligarchy will be like strike back. So it's always a time that the instability. So somebody should only be clear after a while if you are stand against the oligarchy, because there is a lot of retaliation from the oligarchy. And the second thing is, if you stand outside the oligarchy, you will be amateur by definition, because you are out of the national politician. Is that so? What's your opinion of that? Thank you.
Okay, let me briefly summarize the three questions. The first question was about Jokowi's use of women's power, I assume both in terms of the campaign but also as president. Secondly, it was about Jokowi's cultural approach in terms of his language, in particular with Megawati. And thirdly, another question about the oligarchy. So please, brief answers from both speakers.
Yeah, first of all, I don't think that the last KPK selection will up by all women in selecting new commissioner for KPK come up with the best result. So, for example, being candidate that sounds particularly busy, I think. And then the police officer said that in selection interview, the role of KPK just to investigate cases and then hand them over the cases to Attorney General and police. So I don't know why they finally passed through a lot of, not lots, some of candidates that really will put KPK in trouble. So it's like the KPK selection committee give allocation for bin one and then for police and then for another. So not based on the principle of meritocracy. And the second question about cultural approach, yeah, I think it is clear if we look at the last 4 months, Jokowi tried to approach Megawati in different way. So he tried to deepening his smooth relationship with Megawati through cultural approach. It's different if we look at his relationship with other oligarchs. For example, when he dealing with Yusuf Kala, with Surya Paloh, or with Prabowo and Abu Rizal, I think it's all about business concession. It's all about granting them greater access to patronage opportunities. But in terms of Megawati, I don't see, oligarchic style concession. maybe in some cases, but mostly in terms of Megawati as a senior who would like to be respected by Jokowi, yeah, and then by, for example, showing his respect to Megawati, that's enough. When, for example, Jokowi welcome, state visit from other leaders and then invite Megawati to come, that's enough for Megawati. So I think Megawati and Jokowi look at politics is not only about structural factors, but also in terms of culture. So for them, I think politics is also about cultural. And of course, they can speak in same language because they are from, both Javanese.
Thank you, Burhan. So we leave one question for Eve, final comments.
Okay, sure. Just quickly on the appointment of an all-female panel to select the KPK's leadership, I think that's another one of those mysterious decisions where everyone sort of went, what, why? And it seemed almost like it was just to be a bit sensationalist. But there were also there was speculation in the media that perhaps the choice of women was because women are somehow less aggressive and less prosecutorial, and that this was all part of the move to make the KPK more about prevention than it was going to be about prosecution. Also, I think that, as Burhan said, it has proven to have no impact in terms of selecting a more credible team of KPK leaders. And in fact, in one of the question times, one of the women asked one of the candidates, said, "Park, you are so handsome. How are you going to prevent yourself from being tempted from all these women who will surround you?" So that was quite disappointing, actually. On the final question, yes, of course, I think everyone understands that Jokowi was always going to have a hugely challenging time dealing with oligarchic demands, and that he can't just isolate himself from those demands and ignore them. But again, I think sometimes if we apply the counterfactual, what if he had not decided to what if he had decided to get rid of Budi Waseso earlier? What would have happened? Actually, what would have been the consequences? And I think that we can actually be critical of Jokowi sometimes. We can't just forgive him everything because he is surrounded by oligarchs and powerful elites.
Thank you. Before I will ask you to thank our speakers, a few announcements in terms of housekeeping. So it's now morning tea time. It's 10:20. Please be back in the room 10:40 sharp for the economic update. But please now join me in thanking Eve and Burhan for a wonderful presentation.